Hello, BookTube. All right, we're continuing with my library tour here in the little book room. I think this filming is probably doomed. Whatever I encountered on the morning dog walk has been setting off my allergies like crazy. I've been sneezing nonstop. So I imagine that I'm going to have to stop this video at some point, but we'll give it a try, So we'll start with this next shelf, which has two transverse books, both of which are dear to my heart. The first one is the Harvard University Press paperback of David Slavitt's translation of The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius. And the reason why it's dear to my heart is not only because it's a really good translation, but also because yours truly is blurbed on the paperback. And that is an amazing feeling because this is going to be Harvard's Boethius for a long time. And this paperback is going to be more attractive to just the general reading public than the hardcover. And my name is on it. That's a thrill. That never gets old. And then the other transverse books is, you've seen on this library tour that I have many different editions of many works from the Western canon and the Eastern canon. And some of you have often wondered what my favorite edition of some of those works of the canon are. And one of those works, of course, would be Pride and Prejudice, which is a book that I absolutely love. And it's about time I showed you my favorite edition of Pride and Prejudice. It's the guinea pig Pride and Prejudice. There is the only Mr. Darcy that any of us need. And this is even better than the guinea pig Romeo and Juliet, which is no slouch. He was the proudest, most disagreeable man in the world, and everybody hoped he would never come there again. So in the parlance of hack movie reviewers, run, don't walk to your nearest bookstore and buy a copy of the Guinea Pig Pride and Prejudice. But then we get to the shelf itself, which I have to say, glancing at it, it doesn't have a dud at all. I know a feature of these library tours forever, since we've been doing them since the summer, has been for me to pull out a book and say, I have no idea what this is doing here, or I'm not really sure why I still have this, or anything like that. And as I mentioned, the goal for this little inner book room, maybe not the whole collection, because your whole library collection should be bigger than is practical, because it is responsive to whim, right? If you have a personal library, you want it to be responsive to whim. When it's cold outside, or when the libraries are closed, or when a whim strikes you, you want to be able to answer a whim that could become a passion from the books on your shelf. But in your little sanctum sanctorum, in my little book room, I want every book to utterly delight me. And it looks like this shelf does that, so I'm happy about that. The first two volumes, the first two things we have here are by Samuel Dill, Professor Dill. They're 100 years old. They are a classic in their way, just erudition alone makes them that. This is Roman Society. Volume 1 is from Nero to Marcus Aurelius, and Volume 2 is the last century of the Western Empire, in which Dill is kind of sort of not talking about progression of emperors and various defeats and victories in Armenia or Germany, but rather about the culture, about the plays, most especially the literature. The books are absolutely incredible on the literature. And they are, because of the erudition, because of the eloquence of the writer, they are every bit as good now as they were when they were written. I go through them all the time. Then these next two volumes are, I believe these are a Jason Harrigan, Richardson Reed's style commemorative leather-bound thing. The Easton Press. Okay, we've heard that on both their channels. This is the Easton Press edition of Henry Pringle's 2-volume biography of William Howard Taft. And I got them in this edition not because I care about leather-bound, gold gilt editions of anything like this. I do care about such editions. I love them, but I'm really hard on my books, and I know that about myself. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to get, really pretty editions. I got these because my original 2-volume, just ordinary hardcovers, were falling apart. I've used it so much. This is still, after what, 100 years? When was this? 1939, almost 100 years. This is still the best biography of William Howard Taft, which is an absolute scandal. there should have been 2 or 3 800-page books since this, and there haven't been. But it's got all sorts of primary source access, all sorts of details, all sorts of atmosphere. I love it. So I don't mind that it hasn't been superseded. It just bothers me. That's all. I mean, Taft isn't Chester A. Arthur. You know, he was important in a few different ways. You'd think that. Anyway, then we have really a trio of books. They were written at totally different times, but they're really a trio of books. We have the Letters of Archie Pott, which is a collection of his letters to a whole bunch of people. There's our Popinjay author. They're letters to a whole bunch of people, but mostly to President Roosevelt, for whom Archie Pott was a friend, a confidant, and an official White House aide. And then Roosevelt left office and was succeeded by William Howard Taft, who was his best friend and his hand-chosen successor. And after a little bit of awkwardness, it was decided that Archie Pott would just stay. That he would stay in the Taft White House. He was kind of new to the Tafts. They knew him, but they didn't know him that well, and he knew them, but he didn't know them that well, because Taft had been a cabinet member for Roosevelt. But they quickly found him indispensable. Both William Howard Taft and his wife found him indispensable. He was a blowhard, a weepy sentimentalist for the American South, a popinjay, but he was indispensable. He was all of those things, but he was also very funny, very personable, and very efficient. And Roosevelt didn't particularly need all those things. He liked Archie Pott because Archie Pott could be relied upon to be, out at dawn. But Taft really needed an efficient aide-de-camp, and that's what Archie Pott was. So he continued. He saved all of his letters, he annotated them, and he continued. And the next thing that I have here is his 2-volume Letters to Taft and Roosevelt, a huge collection that starts with Roosevelt and then is full of not only great letters to and from President Taft, but also great letters that Archie Pott wrote to his sister about President Taft and about life in the Taft White House. Absolutely indispensable for knowing anything about that period. And that's all that we have. We were going to have a concentrated, comprehensive memoir of the Taft administration. We were going to have a history of McKinley, Roosevelt, and Taft from Archie Pott, because he was up at dawn, like I mentioned. He was busy all the time. He was constantly worrying and fretting, and constantly taking notes, constantly saving letters, constantly asking people, can I save your letters? Can I refer to them in a future work of history? He knew perfectly well that he had a ringside seat at important events and intended to chronicle them. But he wore himself to the bone every day, and during the Taft administration, he floated the idea, his friends floated the idea, maybe he would take a vacation, maybe he would take an actual vacation, an actual full steam vacation, not just leaving for a day. And Taft wholeheartedly agreed with that, not only because he was a big fan of vacations himself, but also because he knew how hard Archie Pott worked. So he wholeheartedly agreed and said, there'll be plenty of work waiting for you when you get back. And Archie Pott loved that kind of send-off because he himself was imagining all the work, not just for the rest of the Taft administration, but for writing those books that would have been invaluable to studying his era. So, reluctantly, feeling like, as overworked people always do, feeling like the world couldn't get along without him, reluctantly, he decided to take a vacation on the Titanic. And he died in freezing cold water in the North Atlantic. And Taft was given the news. He was woken up and given the news about the Titanic, and immediately started to grieve. And his assistant said, well, you don't know. We don't have even preliminary survivor reports yet. You don't know that he's not alive. And Taft said, no, I know the procedure. Women and children first, helping others onto the lifeboats before you get on yourself. And I know Archie, and he would have done that until there was no more room. He certainly went down with the Titanic, and he did. So he never got those books, and that still kills me. But the books that we have, these 3 volumes, are incredibly good, just invaluable. A hint of what might have come, but still invaluable. And then next up, we have 3 big fat orange spine Penguin trade paperbacks. All collections, all fantastic, all highly recommended. First one is the Penguin Book of Irish Fiction by Colm Tóibín. Big, enormous thing that spans the whole of Irish fiction and does a great job. This is an author who's I think he makes a great editor. As I should put it that way. As a fiction writer, I think he makes a great editor. And this is, I've read, we've seen several anthologies like this in this library tour. I've read lots and lots of them. And this is the best one, I think, by a wide margin. So, and it's all because of him. It's all because of the editorial picks. And then we don't stray far from Irish literature, someone who's represented in the Irish Book of Fiction. Here is an enormous book of himself all alone. This is the gigantic collected stories of William Trevor. Which, ordinarily in a book like this, in a huge anthology that size, I would say, I've said it before in this library tour many times, I would say, well, it has its pluses and minuses, it has its weak spots and strong spots, but William Trevor hardly ever puts a foot wrong in the short story form. Hardly ever. It's amazing. He comes from a long line of Irish writers who can't do any wrong when it comes to short story fiction. It's kind of embarrassing for a lot of other nationalities. But again, as with the Penguin Book of Irish Fiction, I recommend that you just get these things. Find them at your used bookstore and get them because they are amazing. And then the third one, we're going to stray away from Irish fiction quite a distance. The third one here is the Penguin Book of Gay Short Stories, which is edited by David Levitt and Mark Mitchell, both of whom are excellent gay authors, one much better than the other. And this is, again, for many gay anthologies, many gay fiction anthologies. And this is the best of them all, I think. Again, it's purely due to the editorial vision of the 2 guys involved. So, again, if you like gay fiction and you maybe don't know anything about it, maybe you think that gay fiction starts and stops with Garth Greenwell, maybe you want to find a book like this and read a little about what else is out there. That might do you some good. Then we go to the big books. You've seen these blacklisted big books edited by Otto Penzler. They're enormous, they're double columned, and they are on a theme. We've seen a few of them on this channel. The Big Book of Real Murders, I think, was the last one. This is, I think, from before we knew each other. This is the Big Book of Jack the Ripper, which is full of Ripper stories, some nonfiction, lots of fiction. And I'm an aficionado of all things Jack the Ripper. I think the story's fantastic. I can't wait until the next big, serious study of Jack the Ripper comes out so that I can pitch it all around and see if somebody will pay me to write about it. But in the meantime, stuff like this, I don't have all the big books. I wish I did. I don't have the Big Book of Christmas Murders. I don't have, there's a big book of, I have the big book of Jack the Ripper, Sherlock Holmes, ghost stories, but I don't have as many as I would like, and I'm looking forward to more as they come out. I hope the series goes on forever because they are just something to lose yourself in. And then the final book. We don't have a lot of chaos here, but still a short video. The final book is one of the great works of nonfiction in recent times. I love it, and I wanted a. We've been fairly free of sneezes so far. We're almost done, so I'm going to keep going. This is 7 Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence of Arabia. And this is a big illustrated hardcover from 100 years ago that I just... See that? Look at that. I just love this edition. I have the Penguin edition. And I've had others. But this is my favorite by far. This is the one I like to pull down. Like we saw a long time ago in this little book room, a big hardcover edition of Leaves of Grass that I have an annotated edition. I have the Penguin edition. I still want the big pretty edition when I want to read it. So, excuse me. There you go. That is this latest shelf. On this library tour, we got out almost without a barrage of sneezes. This is going to go on for the next half hour, so I'm glad that we got this far. So I'll wrap this up and go envy the dead, but I'll be back, I think. Thank you, BookTube.